I'm going to talk about Florida. I'm going to talk about Floridians' perspectives on climate change and use that to bring up broader issues of psychological and cultural reasons why we do and don't worry about this type of threat. And if anyone's interested, I brought copies of this study. I did this with my colleague Tony Leiserowitz, and we did the study in Alaska as well. Alaska and Florida are the two states within the U.S. that are showing signs of climate change right now using many different indices. So we're very interested in perspectives of the residents of these areas. In some ways, they're ahead of other places. We also did the study in New York City, and I can make all that information available. So a little bit about the study. This was statewide representative study, statistically valid, done in May of last year. The margin of error is about 3%. And last night, after the party, so a few drinks, I pulled out the Hispanic population, the Latino population, and if you see anything in parentheses in yellow, I thought it would be interesting for this group if it was statistically different from the Los Gringos. So the first question we're interested in, do people perceive that a problem exists at all? And we asked, how personally convinced are you that global warming is happening? So it was surprising to us, almost 30% of the population is completely convinced, okay? 42% mostly convinced, so that's already 70% of the population, and a small percentage think it's the greatest scientific hoax ever perpetrated on mankind, if some have put it mildly. So among those people who do believe that it exists, what are the causes, okay? Is it completely anthropogenic, human caused? And again, 55%, surprisingly, at least to us, stated that it's human. Natural variability, be it the cycles over time, be it forces of God and nature, or some combination. So again, pretty significant percentage believe that humans are playing some role in that. Okay, so what is the effect going to be here where we care in Florida? And we're looking for kind of overall affective, emotional impressions. Very bad, so among the general population, 40% thought it would have very negative effects. Significantly higher among the Hispanic population, I should note. Bad effects, 47%, so again, well over the majority, and very few think it will have good or very good influences. So again, there's a perception of the problem. It's a negative perception of the problem. So how much do people actually worry about this problem? Well, only 10% in our whole sample worry a great deal about the problem. Not much at all. A fair amount is only about a third, and little or not at all is well over the majority. So again, you have a higher, almost double the rate of worry among a Hispanic population. We can talk, maybe hear from the audience on perhaps why this is so. So we recognize it's a problem, but we're not very worried, okay? Well, the first point I'll make is we tend to worry about threats by how close they are. Close, I mean psychologically in time. Are they going to happen soon? And in space, are they happening to me? That's my hands. Is it going to happen to future generations, my little boy? Is it happening, to faraway places that always get hit with natural hazards, or is it going to happen here in my own backyard? So we ask questions about the temporal dimension. So when will global warming start to have dangerous impacts here in Florida? And we did this survey, when we did it in 2008, 30% believe the impacts are already occurring. Within 10 years, as Sylvia pointed out, 10 years is kind of a realistic time frame from we can all think within a 10-year period. 100 years, 13%, and never is, again, kind of the naysayer population is 14%. We compare this to, we did the survey, asked the same question in 2004, and you can see there's been more people believe it's occurring now or within 10 years. So, just as Brian just showed with the IPCC report, there's increasing awareness among the general population as well. So, if I move on to from the temporal to more the spatial dimension, when we ask how serious a threat is global warming to a number of different factors, The first we ask about are kind of the non-human species. And people believe, 41% believe it will be a very serious threat to plants and animals, and again, much higher among the Latino population. Far away, people in other countries, about a third. People in Florida, slightly less. Your family, only about a fifth believe it'll, threaten them personally. And so the things that you really care about, which is, your own family, only about a fifth take it seriously. So the second reason I'll argue why people aren't as worried about it is they're not connecting the impacts to impacts of climate change to the things they worry about. And there's a lot of other competing worries out there. If you look at I'm going to make this much simpler than it appears. The red bars just show when we ask people how likely do you think each of the following will occur in the next 50 years, and it's very likely is the number. But just to point out a few, the number one answer that they think is very likely, about 46%, are worse hurricanes, worse storms. That's the least defensible scientifically in the community of what will happen, and the change in storms will probably be relatively marginal. Just to point out fewer fish, only about a third related to the marine ecosystem at all in that sense. Sea level rise, as Brian just showed, that's the 1,000-pound gorilla. Again, that's the most devastating impact, and only a third see that as very likely within the next 50 years. What hits our pocketbooks here in Florida? Tourism. Sea level rise, is obviously linked to beach erosion, no beaches, no tourists, no coral reefs, no tourists. Only about a quarter notice that. And often what motivates human action is a human health issue, and people do not relate health problems to climate change. So to finish up with a couple other explanations on why we don't worry about these things, if you open question, ask people to rank their, what they think priorities for US Congress should be, among the very high priority category, global warming comes in 10th, okay, behind all these other issues. Many surveys over the years, environmental issues tend to be somewhere between 8 and 11. So again, it's fairly low priority. We wake up in the morning with a lot of worries. We have to rank them, and often global warming falls short because it's often not connected to, we don't make the mental causal connection to issues that we care about. So if we're not so worried, why all this debate that goes on about it? And here we're talking about framing and ideology. Whether, the issue has been presented often as environmental, tree-hugging, corduroy-wearing group that cares about this, the environmentalists. But, if you frame it as a national security, energy independence issue, you get a lot more people involved in it. Do you frame it solely as it's going to be an economic cost, or is it a moral issue? And here's what would Jesus drive? Is often invoked. And now there's many, what used to be considered, anti-global warming, the right, the so-called right, are now the Christian Evangelical Environmental Network, and many are pushing the cause. So it's a wider net that we're catching now. I won't go into detail, just the words we use has a major difference on our acceptance of policies. We did this experiment across the country, thousands of people, asking about your support for surcharge for gas, for clean renewable energy, or for increased cost of air travel. If you present this surcharge as a tax, you get some support from Democrats, and you do get resistance from independents and Republicans. If you call it a carbon offset, it reverses, okay? So merely just the semantics play a big role in triggering kind of our ideological base. And these are very powerful tools for communicators to keep in mind. I think the last piece of data I'll show, because a lot of people hear in the media, and this is from a national survey, and it's not just how you say the message, it's who's delivering the message, how much you trust or distrust the provider of the information. And this is, if you look at the scale, it's starting from strongly distrust, and it barely gets above somewhat trust. So it's not exactly real inspiring on how we trust sources of information, but I'll just make it simple. How many people here work for head corporations. Not many people trust you, from either the people who don't believe in global warming, the general population, or the people who think the sky is falling and global warming is the worst thing ever. Scientists and doctors are at the top of the scale. I know we have a couple filmmakers and artists here. I'd be curious to ask about where they fit in there. But, you know, how you get your message out there, think about who's delivering it for you. So just to finally finish, humans aren't well adapted for risks that are far into the future. We've adapted for kind of fight or flight, and global warming is distant. It's temporally and spatially distant, and we need to connect it to things that we care about now. So whether it's, you know, global warming, to ocean health, to harmful algal blooms, to cholera, that may make a connection. The same way with when we had the ozone hole problem, people linked it to skin cancer, to going blind, and it had a strong reaction among the public. Many of the connections are complex and compete with other issues. Again, we have to, you know, make the connections obvious for people. And finally, the framing and ideology, as I mentioned, there's no silver bullet. There's no one framing, and there's no one source of information. We need to be strategic in how we talk about the issue.